Welcome to Chapter 4. Today we will be learning about divisibility and factors. Like always, the objective and vocabulary are very important. So today, by the end of the lesson, you should know how to use divisibility tests and how to find factors. And so that you better understand what we're talking about this section, we also have a term for vocabulary called divisibility. So if you want to write this in your notes, that would be awesome. Divisibility. We know that one integer is divisible by another if the remainder is 0 when you divide. So if I were to take a number like so, 4, wow, that is the biggest marker I've ever seen in my entire life. Let me rewind here. 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. There is no remainder. Okay? So if we were to say remainder equals 0, that means that 4 is divisible by 2. So, let's go back to our divisibility factors and let's take a look at all these different types of numbers that you will see throughout this chapter. So, how do we know something's divisible by 2? Well, the key term is if the last digit is even. So, if you look at the very last digit, so the last number in a number, you want to hope that it's divisible by 2. Okay, that would mean that it is divisible by 2. So we would look, for instance, on this example, we would look at the number 6. 6 is divisible by 2 because 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 123,456 is divisible by 2. The number 3. If the sum of its digits is divisible by 3, what that means is if you have a number like 123,456, I know if this is divisible by 3 if I add up all its digits. So if I add together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that comes out to be 21. Is 21 divisible by 3? Yes, it is, because it's 7. So that means it would be divisible by 3. Okay, let's move on to numbers 4 and 5. A number is divisible by 4 if the number formed by the last 2 digits is divisible by 4. So in this example, we're continuing to use this number 123,456. We look at the last 2 digits, which is 56. Now you might need your calculator for this one, but you could always do it the long way. Is 56 divisible by 4? Yes, it's 14. So this number would also be divisible by 4. So far, this one number that we've been using, the 123,456, it has been divisible by 2, 3, and 4. Now, how do we know if it's divisible by 5? If something is divisible by 5, it has to end in a 5 or a 0. So this number, unfortunately, ends in a 6, so we know that it is not divisible. Now let's say we took off this 6 and just made it 12,345. It ends in a 5, so that it is divisible by 5. So there's an example and a counterexample of what that, or an example that works and an example that does not work for the number 5. Going back to 2 and 3, we know if something is divisible by 6 if it is divisible by 2 and 3. So if you are looking at the number 6, you actually have to go back up and look at these 2. So you want to go look at your number 123,456. You want to look up here and go, is it divisible by 2? Yep, it's even. Is it divisible by 3? Yep. If I add all the numbers up and divide it by 3, it gives me a whole number, so I know it's divisible by 6. Okay? Tricky one is always number 7, okay? If the number formed after the following 2 steps is divisible by 7, first remove the last digit, then from the first remaining, subtract 2 times the digit we just removed. When I read that, I go like this. Huh? Basically, there is no real rule for divisibility of 7. Okay? So do not worry about that. That is something that you will just have to actually work out. Number 8, if the number formed by the last 3 digits is divisible by 8. So instead of number 4 where it says the last 2, now we're going to the last 3. So for an example, 456 is divisible by 8, so that means that this big number is divisible by 8. Okay, just like for number 3, number 9 is if the sum of its digits is divisible by 9. So if you were to add all these up again and you get 21, which we referenced before, it says it's not divisible by 9 because 21 divided by 9 is not a whole number. Remember, we want a remainder of 0. But if you were to do 123,453, that is divisible by 9 because 18 divided by 9 is 2. And probably the easiest one besides numbers 5 and 10, basically, if it ends in a 0, that means it's divisible by 10. Now, some of you might be asking yourself, well, I wonder why Mr. Sand doesn't have a 1 here. Well, that's because if I took the 1 here, I would just write everything as in everything is divisible by 1. Okay? Anything times 1 is itself, so anything divided by 1 is itself. Okay, so let's move on to examples. We will work on these together, and then I will give you a couple problems on the computer for you to do, and you'll answer them and then submit them through Educanon. So let's take the first problem, for instance. Is 1,028 divisible by 2? Well, if I know back to my divisibility rules, a number is divisible by 2. Excuse me, burped a little bit. Whoopsies. If it ends in an even number, it's divisible by 2. So, is 1,028 divisible by 2? I would say yes, because it ends in 8. Okay. What about letter B? 572 by 5. If I look back to my divisibility rules, I know that if a number ends in a 5 or a 0, it's divisible by 5. I don't know if that looks like a 0 or 5 to you, but that looks like a 2 to me, so I would say no. Okay. Last one is 275 divisible by 10. I would say no, because I know that a number has to end in 0. Now, make sure that you understand that when we say yes or no, you have to explain each time. Even though it does not say explain up here, we still expect you to explain. So make sure that you explain. The next part of this section is knowing if the first number is divisible by the second. So we're still going back to divisibility rules. So we're not using the easy terms like 2 and 5 and 0. We're moving on to more difficult ones like 3 and 9. So going back to 3 and 9, the reason that these are together is because they're very similar. If I want to check if something is divisible by 3 or if it's divisible by 9, I have to add up the digits. So if I'm going to take this, I'm going to do this number 1 plus 0 plus 2 plus 8. Now, I know 1 plus 0 is 1, 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 8 is 11. So is 11 divisible by 3? My answer would be no. Okay? And why would you say that? Well, if you show your work, you would know that this is not a whole number. Okay? It's actually going to give me a decimal. The next one, 5 plus 2 plus 2. Well, I know that 5 plus 2 is 7, and 7 plus 2 is 9. Is 9 divisible by 9? You would say yes. And why? Because your work showed you that the digits of 5, 2, and 2 equal 9, and 9 is divisible by 9. So your answer for A is no. Answer for B is yes. Now we're going to a story problem which all of you I know love. Miss Washington's class is having a class photo taken. Each row must have the same number of students. So Miss Washington's not important. Class, not important. Is having a class photo taken, not important. Each row, okay, this is probably important. Each row must have the same number of students. So we cannot have any remainders. There are 35 students in the class. how can Miss Washington arrange the students in rows if there must be at least 5 students but no more than 10 in each row? So what I'm going to do here is these are rows, these are columns. Okay, so we're not talking about columns right now. We are talking about rows. So let's see how many rows it would take. So how can Miss Washington arrange the students in rows if there must be at least 5 students? So let's say I took the very minimum and I said that there had to be 5 students in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I know there's 35 students. So I know that I'm going to probably have to do another row of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'm going to have to do another row of 5. Okay, so I'm taking my technology skills and looking to copy and paste this. So here is another one. Here's another group. Now if you've been counting 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, Miss Washington's going to run out of room pretty soon. 30 and 35. So basically, if she wanted 5 students in each row, how many rows? She would need 7 rows of 5 students. In our next class period, I will give you your homework and I will be breaking you up into groups on how well you did on the different questions that you have answered using EduCanon. Make sure you guys understood the lesson. If you need to go rewind and rewatch, that is definitely okay. Feel free to use your book also. I hope this was a good lesson and it helped you. Make sure to raise your hand and ask questions. And I am out of here. See ya!